Going on, everybody? We are here talking about the NFL playoffs and who I think has already locked their way into the next round, who hasn't, and who's going to take up some of these last few spots because it's going to get a little bit dicey down the stretch here. So let's talk about who I think has already currently basically locked their way into the next round. I think the division leaders right now, except for the Falcons, have all done that. So the Eagles, the Niners, the Lions, the Ravens, the Dolphins, the Chiefs, and the Jaguars. So after that, I think there's been two wildcard teams who have already pretty much locked their way in, the Cowboys and the Browns. I think both teams will make the playoffs. Both teams have a great record, and I think kind of where they are, unless they basically lose out, would be hard for both teams to miss the playoffs, so I think they're both in. So let's talk about the teams that are currently sitting in those other two wildcard spots on both sides that I think could change, and we'll also talk about the South here in a minute. So let's start off with the Seattle Seahawks. They have been a little bit on a downslope here. They have not been playing very good football here recently. I still think they will probably make the playoffs. They are one of the better teams in the league. They made the playoffs last year. I just don't think this group is going to make a splash come playoff time. And honestly, it wouldn't shock me if they fell apart. If the NFC was a little bit stronger, I think they could very easily be missing the postseason right now because they just don't look good enough. I think Geno Smith is a good enough guy to kind of get you to that point, but he's not going to win you much outside of maybe getting you to the playoffs. And I think that's their biggest issue right now, and Geno is just not good enough to get them very far. But I still think they have a really good shot at making the playoffs. If I had to say, I'd say they have about 80% chance of making the playoffs. Now, let's talk about Pittsburgh Steelers. Right now, they are playing out of their minds, despite the fact they have absolutely no offense. They were talking about the breakout game of Kenny Pickett this last week, despite the fact they won 16-10. Yeah, they had a good offensive game compared to what they used to. They didn't score, though, so it didn't matter too much. But I would also say Pittsburgh right now, they're not going to make a ton of splash come playoff time because it's hard to win playoff games when you don't have much offensive firepower. But I think they also have about an 80% chance of making the postseason. Now, the 2-7 seeds is where we get a little bit hairy, and it could be up in the air with anybody. Let's start with the AFC. It's a little bit more put together. I believe the Colts are currently holding on to the 7th seed with the Texans. And I think there's one other team I can't think of off the top of my head that's tied with the same record. I know the Texans and the Colts do. It might not be anybody else with the same record. I think Buffalo is just one game back. So it's kind of a tight race there. Can Buffalo still make the playoffs? I think it would be hard for them at this point. They just don't seem like the same team. They fall apart. They've lost games they should have won. I think Buffalo, I would say, has probably a 30-ish% chance of making the postseason. And the Colts, on the other hand, I think they have about a 20%. I don't think they are really set to make a playoff run. I think they're overperforming a little bit this year. And I think honestly, their record's a little bit of a not accurate record. But then again, who knows? Because at any given time, these guys could just keep rattling them off. I mean, they got Minshew Mania out there playing his butt off. They were one of, I think, 4 teams that went undefeated in November. So they could potentially, it was the Broncos who was the other team, by the way, I just thought of it. They could very potentially make a playoff run here. It wouldn't shock me. With the Texans, they have probably the best rookie quarterback we've seen in a long time. Nobody expected this from Stroud, I don't think. I think we expected him to maybe be good. Some people thought he was going to be a bust. It was going to be up in the air, but he's played absolutely amazing. He's in the MVP race, and he has turned this Texan team around. I think, honestly, if I was going to pick any of these 4 teams, and I'll get into the Broncos here in a second, I would say I think the Texans had the best chance. The division's a little bit easy, so on the stretch, playing the division games won't affect them quite as much. I don't think they play anybody too crazily tough down the stretch. I'm sure they'll probably play like Cleveland or Pittsburgh, as they played that whole division, and I don't think they played them yet. But I think I would give them about a 50% chance to make the playoffs. The Colts, I would give them maybe a 20. And then the Broncos, I think actually the Broncos could shock us. I think they have a good shot. They do play Kansas City, I believe, one more time. And I think they play the Chargers one more time, which Chargers may not have been very good this year, but that's still not going to be an easy out. So I would say the Broncos probably have a 10% chance. But it wouldn't shock me. If the Broncos made a playoff run, I wouldn't be shocked by any means. So let's talk about the NFC side. So this is a little bit more wild right now because none of these teams I think are very good who's in it. I would say Let's talk about the South first, and then we'll go over the wild card because the wild card's a little bit better. I think the teams in that conversation are better. So the South, I think honestly, the Falcons currently lead it at 5-6, which is awful. I don't think they'll hold on to it. They're not well coached. They don't use their offensive weapons very well. If they did start using their offensive weapons very well, I think they would be good enough to easily win that division, given how weak it is, how there's nobody that's a true threat within it. But I just think that they don't care. they need to fire their coach by the end of the year because it's just not working, and we've seen it. We know it's not going to work, but we keep just hoping it does. And if they can't get a quarterback in this coming up draft, I think the Falcons will continue being this middle of the road team because they don't have that quarterback. I would say I would give them probably a 20% chance. Maybe higher, I guess, because their division's so hard. I would say maybe it's a 40% chance because I think I'm going to give kind of an even 100% within this division because I think the Saints are the team that will probably get out of it. Again, not very well coached. Derek Carr clearly wasn't the answer. I thought he would play a little bit better going there. He had a lot of fire under his butt to prove himself, and he just hasn't played that great. But I would say the Saints probably have about a 50% chance, and the Bucs, Baker Mayfield's actually played pretty well this year. But again, I don't think they the greatest coach team. Sometimes just having that defensive guy-minded dude as your head coach just doesn't work nowadays because offense is what makes or breaks the NFL. They're kind of getting also a little bit older and whatnot, and they have shown they can't keep up with good teams. So I would give them about a 10% chance to make the playoffs. So I think the Saints will evidently win that division, but the Falcons could very well do it if they keep using Bryjon or Drake London or Kyle Pitts, like actual good NFL players and not like role players or whatever the hell they've been doing with them. They haven't been using them correctly. That's all I know. So let's talk about that last wild card spot. I think there's about 3 teams in this mix: the Rams, the Packers, and the Vikings. So let's start with the Vikings because they currently hold on to that 7th seed. I think the Vikings have the lowest chance of these 3 teams making the playoffs, even though they hold on to that seed. Josh Dobbs, he came in, he looked great in week 1. Like, maybe he could do it, but he's not been able to keep that up the last 2 weeks. They dropped both of those games. They're now 6-6, only 1 game ahead of the other 2 teams. I just don't know if I believe that Dobbs or Jaron Hill could realistically take them to the postseason, and even if they do get there, is it worthwhile because they're just going to get eliminated in the first round? I would say I would give them probably a 10% chance out of the 3. I'm going to have kind of a similar thing as the South. I just don't think they quite have what it takes to get there, and I think they're going to come up a little bit short. As we talk on to, let's go ahead and go into the next team in line, the Green Bay Packers. I think they have the best chance to make the postseason out of these 3. I'm going to give them a 50% chance. Jordan Love has been playing significantly better than he was at the beginning of the year. He's just kind of kept growing as a quarterback as time's gone on, and I think they legitimately have the best shot. They have a good roster, decent head coach, and now the quarterback's playing really well. The biggest thing for them is their offensive weapons are not the greatest. Aaron Jones has been hurt here, hasn't been playing anything amazing anyway. Their wide receivers lead the league in drops. That would be the only concern, but they're 1 game out. They've been playing a lot better, and I think they're the best of these 3 teams, so I'm going to give them a 50% chance. Again, I don't expect any of these teams to really make a splash. They're going to end up playing probably San Francisco, which is just going to be a beatdown probably. It's basically going to be a free bye for San Francisco. But let's talk about the last team in the mix, the Rams. I would say they have about a 40% chance of making the postseason. Matthew Stafford's still solid. They are one of the best coaches teams. Sean McVay right out there carrying them. But outside of that, they don't have a ton. I mean, they got Aaron Donald, but outside of him and Stafford, this team shouldn't be where they are. They shouldn't be really competing. It doesn't do them a ton of good, but they don't have draft picks, so why as well, right? So at the end of the day, I'm not sold on them too much, but I believe they have a much higher chance than the Vikings, and I don't think the Packers are that much better. I think they're all kind of in that similar mix of not being very good. But if you guys enjoy this type of video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I might do it as we get closer to the playoffs, like week 16, if there's still openings up available to see what'll happen. If you guys want to see that, hit that subscribe button, hit that follow button, leave a like, comment. I'll see you in the next one.